Welcome again for another exciting user experience lecture. Today we talk about conducting user research, and this is about inquiries and interviews. This is how we get data from the actual users. Let's have a look. Why is user research important? What do we need to know? What are the research methods? What are different approaches to research? And we will run a practice activity. So learning objectives will be describe the skills required to conduct an effective user interview, define contextual inquiry and articulate its benefits, conduct a contextual inquiry study, prepare unbiased interview questions, and conduct an effective user interview. So let's have a look at this. We're going to create what we generally call a local kiosk. A local kiosk is basically when you go and stand in the middle of the street, maybe, and you ask people questions. So random people on the street, and you just ask them, do you like this? Do you not like this? What do you do during the day? This is what we call a local kiosk. So what do you think are the top 3 pain points of a local kiosk user? So write each pain point on a separate post-it and then discuss them with your neighbors. This is an activity that will happen in class, so discuss among yourselves. Now, just to give an example, what could be a pain point? A pain point could be how do you record the data? What are the questions that you're going to be asking? How many people do you need to ask? So these could be pain points. So let's get down to conducting the actual research. So let's understand what is user research. Let's start with a quote from Lincoln. Give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So try to think about this and think about what is it trying to say. It's quite interesting. Here's another one. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution or solutions. So what are they trying to say? They're saying that finding a solution is relatively simple if you have spent enough time in thinking about the problem. Because if you do the opposite, if you spend 5 minutes thinking about the problem and 55 minutes in trying to solve that problem, by the time you finish, you're probably going to realize that your solution only solved one little part of that problem. There are so many things that you did not think about. So why do we need to understand our users? Because to solve real problems, that is a very basic question. Remember what we normally say, that the user doesn't always know what he wants. So remember one thing very importantly, and this goes for every user designer out there. You are not the user. When you interview people, do not think that they're going to be the last users. And especially the designer has to be completely unbiased, has to be completely outside of thinking whether or not the solution should work. So don't assume that you know their problems. Don't assume that they will behave as you expect them to. And don't assume that you thought of everything. So be unbiased. Do not get caught in thinking that if it works for you, it will work for 100 different users. let's have a look at this. This is where we can start thinking about reality versus actual needs. Think about a restaurant website. So on a restaurant website, you have these kind of things. You have these animations, you have this downloadable menu, which is probably 40 megabytes. And this happened to me a lot of times. You can't copy and paste because it's Flash. Letter from the founder. So it's very not really what you really need. If I go to a restaurant website, what could it be what I need? I need the menu, I need the special and the happy hour info, I need the address with a link to Google Maps, I need an online reservation system that actually works. So this is the difference between what I really want and this is what I really get. But guess what? Why haven't restaurant websites evolved into this part instead? And that's simple. That's because people are now used to being marketed. So they know that people will want to see flashy things rather than functionality. And think about the website of a university. Things that are different from what you would expect versus what you actually get. So these are all the things on the front page of a university website. And try to do this. You'll get a campus photo, you get a promotion on campus, you'll get the full name of the school, you get a letter from the president, and all of these things. But why did you go on that website? You went there because you wanted the campus address, you wanted the application form, you wanted the academic calendar. So really, what is the only thing that matches the expectation against what you get? It's the full name of the school. And the Dickey University website is not much different. We have tried to improve so that as soon as you get in, you can sort of find what you're looking for, but we are still very much more on the things that you find on the website instead of what you really need. So why to understand users again? Because we need to align with the team. Research can align team members' understanding of the problems. Research can remove incorrect assumptions people may have going into a project. And clarifying who the users are and what the problems are helps remove personal preferences from the design. And you might have seen this before. This is a solution after completion, and this is kind of what everybody has in their mind. So you can see that the customer explained in a very weird way what he wanted, and then everybody interprets it in a much different ways. And I actually like the fact that we have the marketing people who have this nice armchair. I like how we build the client for an actual roller coaster. And which one is do we have an actual output? No, not really. So why do we do this? Because we want to save money. Remember that at the end of the day, we are researchers because we want to improve processes. Improving the process increases our revenue. Increasing revenue works in two ways. You either charge the client more or you spend less money in trying to get the solution done. So research upfront can help you avoid designing or building things that don't matter. And continual research can validate your ideas and save you time and money. So here, following this graph, what you can see is if we start in a place where we have a lot of alternatives, then by doing user research, we decrease this number of alternatives, and then we do more iterations, and they keep on decreasing to the point where we only have one good implementation to do, and we launch. If instead we start with a few, what's going to happen is that instead of making things more clear, we are making things more difficult. And this is problematic. What we want is we want a nice line that goes down to launch and is one alternative only, is one product instead of many products that we need to go and test with the market. So to practice user-centered design, if you are not involving your users, you are not practicing user-centered design. There are users. If you don't have users in your development, you are not using UCD. If you are not involving your users, then you are not designing a user experience. So don't go back in the 80s, when most of you were not even born, where we tried to build something and then we use marketing to make people appreciate it. So we have seen a few quotes from Donald Norman before. Iterative development of user interfaces involves steady refinement of the design based on user testing and other evaluation methods. Basics of user research. So think about people and what connects them with the activities, with what they actually have to do. It's all about the people, their activities, and the context of those activities. So at the end of the day, you are serving people, and those people have to get into certain activities, like buy a product, eat a meal, go up the escalator, open a door. That is the activity. And to do that, you need to try and provide the context, which is the help that you can provide to the user. We have seen it before. If you have a door, but you don't know if you have to push or pull, what could be some of the context? A context could be a label on the door saying push. This will allow the user to push the door and get it open. Internal factors. People. User-centric design is about people. So we need to know their personal history. We need to know their mood. We need to know their culture. And we need to know their education. Why do we need this? Because we want to go and build something that they will appreciate. Think, for example, if you are building something that has a lot of references to motherhood or to children, and think if for an unfortunate event, the first user that you get is going to be a woman who cannot have children. So this is why we need to keep this into consideration. And you may think this is an edge scenario. I was in that edge scenario. I have worked on a project where we were planning for the future. And I had to go through lawyers to clearly understand what I could say and what I could not say. So for example, I cannot go and say during a showcase, when you're 65, you might be likely to have cancer. I am not allowed to say that. That's because some people in public, they might get offended or they might get sad about it. So know your audience, know who you're building it for. And some external factors: location, distractions, devices, relationships between the objects and people, and relationships between people and other people. Goals and activities. or goals and tasks, which are the activities. What is the user trying to accomplish? In a general sense, when they might use your product. What task must the user complete to accomplish their goals? Are there any pain points in the current way they go about these tasks? So, the one thing that we normally do can be the customer care experience. How do you currently handle your customers when they call with a complaint? So, what are the pain points right now about that? How do you handle it? So that's why you need to know exactly what is the activity that you're trying to do, because there could be a lot more context associated with it. Remember the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and how. So that's actually 6, but for some reason we have always used 5 instead. Who are our users? Business or consumers? What are the demographics? Do they have prior knowledge of our content? What's their culture? What's their education level? If you're trying to build an application for people over 70, they're not going to be educated on using smart devices. The biggest problem, for example, that you have in trying to build a monitoring device for older people is that they simply don't want to wear it. It doesn't matter if it's going to save their life. They're either going to forget or they simply don't want to wear it. What are the habits? Do they use social networks? What sites and products do they use? Do media consumers or are they producers? So do they watch YouTube or are they creating things instead? What is the relationship with the products? What is the relationships with other people? Where are they accessing it from? Are they from work, from the library, at home, in the car or on the road? Are they distracted? When are they visiting our site or app? Is it going to be in the morning? Is it going to be in the evening? Is it routine? Is it during a crisis? I give you another example. I had to build an application for educating mothers. And the problem was mothers, young mothers, are very busy. So if you plan to send a message about information to a person, to a mother with a 2-year-old who is basically waking up at 5 a.m. to feed the baby and do all the activities inside the house, you need to find the perfect moment. Because if you send the message in the morning, she will just say, oh, I don't want to read this, stuff it. So you have to find the proper moment, which could be, in my case, was 8 p.m. because the baby is sleeping and she's just unwinding. How are they accessing it? What browser or operating system? Are they still stuck with Microsoft Explorer? Is it a desktop? Is it a tablet? Is it a mobile or other device? Broadband or slow connection? Is it a proxy server or firewall? Think, for example, my case. What if I just went and put all of my lectures on YouTube and then I gave them to you guys who might be in China where you can't access YouTube? There you go. Perfect problem. Now, let's have some discussion time. Now that you know what you should be looking for when researching your users, what should you know about your local kiosk users in order to determine and then solve their pain points? So brainstorm 5 ideas with your neighbor. Think about what it is that you are trying to get from your users. So think about an application that you want to build. Maybe you want to build an application to help stray cats. Maybe you want to build an application to help sell a particular product. So what are the questions that you're going to ask? So sit down and think about the questions and write them down. So how do we obtain this information? We have to look at the different types of research. So this graph kind of shows the different types of research that you might have. We have behavioral, we have attitudinal, we have quantitative versus qualitative, we have generative versus evaluative. Generally, the most important one would be whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative is, for example, how many times. Qualitative is every time you do it, how do you do it? So these are some of the research methods that you can use. You can do interviews, contextual inquiry, diary studies, card sorting, surveys, eye tracking, data analysis, A and B testing. But just to be simple, we're going to focus on two main ones, which are interviews and contextual inquiry. So let's have a look at the user interviews. First of all, you need to try and build a relationship with the person you are interviewing. So don't be too formal, be informal, but keep that respect and try to build a good sense that you care, that you are there not just because you're getting paid, but because you are listening to your user. So what is a user interview? It's a one-on-one conversation between researcher and participant. It's qualitative, tends to be more evaluative than generative, tends to be more attitudinal than behavioral. Why is it qualitative? Because if we just had to do quantitative, we could have just sent out a survey and say, how many times do you brush your teeth at night? Qualitative instead could be, when do you brush your teeth? How long do you brush them? How are your gums today? So what are the benefits? It's very personal. So increases the user empathy. Remember, empathy is about building that relationship with the user so that the user can give you better quality data. It produces rich qualitative information and it enables follow-up questions. Think about when do you clean your teeth? And say, oh, I clean my teeth at nighttime. Oh, why do you clean them at nighttime instead of right after dinner? So this could be follow-up questions that can come up. Some challenges. You need to make participants feel comfortable. How often have you maybe been called for an interview and then you just don't want to answer? What do they do to make you answer? And how do you react? You need to listen. You need to listen actively. You need to respect boundaries. You need to avoid leading. You need to avoid dead ends, and you need to avoid compound questions. So you can't tell a user, for example, how often do you brush your teeth? And perhaps make him feel uncomfortable about it. Because what will happen is the user will say, oh, I brush my teeth at least 2 times a day. We have some research that says that actually a lot of people only brush their teeth once a day. And we actually had an experience where people said something, but videos said completely the opposite. Here's a bad example. Here's a question. So, you feel that grilling outdoors fosters family togetherness? Sure. Is there anyone in your family who doesn't enjoy grilling? My father. But you feel it's a bonding ritual all the same? Yeah, kinda. How does your grilling work in the text of your life? Will charcoal have interfered with the process of social bonding? I'm not sure really. We just prefer gas. So the last one was very complicated. We went from a, a very simple question to now something much more personal, much more complicated, and asked in a very difficult way. Asking good questions. Ask open-ended questions because the user might give you more information that can lead to more answers. Ask about behavior, not intention. Avoid leading the questions. Avoid the compound questions. Avoid pointing out specific issues. So, ask open-ended questions. Do you like to use free weights at the gym? See, this is not good because this is now yes or no. Instead, the question is, what types of equipment do you like to use at the gym? Now, this leaves a lot more to think about for the user. Another wrong one. How many times do you plan to go to the gym this year? Makes people feel uncomfortable. They will say, oh, I'm planning to go 2 times a week. And then we know that they're probably never going to go. So, can you please describe your gym schedule last year? This is much more comfortable and people will be happy to answer. Would you say cardio classes are a better workout than weightlifting? And what type of exercise gives you the best workout? See, the first question, you're basically telling them the answer that you want to know. And so the information that you're trying to deliver is wrong and can be polluted by whatever the user is going to say. Avoid compound questions. When you are at the gym, do you use free weights or weight machines or like bands or straps? Just don't. Make it clear one at a time. Avoid pointing out specific issues. A lot of people think free weights are dangerous. What are your thoughts on that? So try to rewrite this question. It just doesn't make people feel comfortable. So let's conduct the user interviews now. How to conduct a user interview. Prepare topics and questions. Conduct interviews. Analyze results. So let's start with a topic map. What it is that you're going to talk about. Don't write your questions yet. Write just tags of what you want to talk about. Start preparing your questions. Consider what you need to know about each topic. Carefully write unbiased questions. Consider what types of responses you might get. Write potential follow-up questions. And use your questions as a guide, not as a script. Make participants feel comfortable. Always ask for permission if you're recording. Explain the reason for interview. Explain that their answers are confidential. Don't be a question robot. Don't just go question 1, question 2, question 3. Take notes, but don't be buried in them. You don't want the person you are interviewing to wait for you to finish writing your notes. Professional tips. Listen at least twice as much as you speak. Don't feel the need to fill silence. Don't interrupt. Keep them talking. Tell me more about. What do you mean by? Help me understand better. The tipping point. You know when you've asked a great question because the conversation will just flow. Smart interviewers create space for stories to emerge. The moment a participant shifts from short answers to stories, is a tipping point in an interview. It means that the participant is happy to talk about you. He wants to give you more information, and that's the good part. It's much like real life. We small talk with our coworkers, but the tipping point to real honesty and openness is when we start to share our true experiences and stories. It can feel uncomfortable to probe, but the interview setting is not the same to worry about social discomfort. Now we have an exercise. So key objectives. So work in pairs. Create interview questions to understand a current user pain point surrounding the kiosk experience. So 8 minutes to write 5 unbiased interview questions each, and 10 minutes you have to go and share your questions with your partner and narrow down to final 5 questions. What do you need? A problem statement. So think about a problem that you want to talk about. Perhaps poverty, perhaps a bad smell in your dormitory. Perhaps you want to talk about how do they go shopping. You want to ask them about their favorite food. And what are the resources in this case? Pencil and paper. So let's have a look at understanding a bit more about the contextual inquiry. So contextual inquiry is more about understanding what happens around the user without interrupting it. So quietly observing users is more valuable and the real reason to go into the field. For example, you want to know if the user is driving while working or working while driving. If you ask the user a question like, do you talk while driving? Do you talk on the phone while driving? The user will probably say no. So your data will be polluted, will not be good. So how can you do it? Well, you put a camera inside the phone. You put a camera inside the car, and this way you can find out. So when do you use this method? Before trying to change existing behavior, redesigning an existing system, when you have a finite number of potential users, intranets or administrative features. I give you an example of how you can use this. In one of the interviews, we talked to Julie, and she said during their research, they asked people, how many times do you brush your teeth? And the answer was, I brush my teeth at least 2 times a day, one in the morning, one in the night. What they have done then is they have put cameras and they realized that the people were lying. They only brushed their teeth once a day. So this is contextual methodology. This is a contextual inquiry. Why we do this? Design should support and extend users' existing behavior. Users are experts in how they do things, more explicit than interviews, surveys, or other data. Unique features of contextual inquiry is conducted in the context. Instead of asking a person, so how do you do this particular thing while you're working? So instead of asking, we just follow the person and try to understand when he is actually doing it. So we don't ask him, we just try to understand that from his behavior. Participant and the researcher work together. You can't just spy people, you need to make them acknowledge. Researchers shares the observations and ask for clarifications, which could be, do you normally not brush your teeth at night? Benefit of the contextual inquiry, it reveals tacit knowledge, means things that the user may not want to share with you. It's more flexible, it focuses on the right things, and is detailed. So for your first assignment, we're going to redesign the whole experience, meaning that you need to do some user research. So this will actually be part of your report. So start thinking about who are you going to be asking? What questions do you want to ask? Remember, we are trying to rebuild the website and make it more friendly for both new generations and old generations. So what are the questions you want to ask? Who are your users? So plan the questions, and once they're planned, start working also on gathering that data. You may want to ask some friends, you may want to ask your parents or people of different ages. Try to have maybe 5 to 10 different people for each group. Okay, thank you.